Hi, I'm Brian English, Wappler forum name Hyperbytes. In this module we're going to be looking at the processing of that registration code that we set up in the previous module to authorize the account of the person looking to register within the website. So at the moment we have a situation where the person registers, and on the success event of that registration we use the browser to send that person to the home page. But what we want to do now is we want to change that routing, and what we want to do is make it so that the person is routed to a validation screen so that they can validate their code. So what I'm going to do is first of all create a new page. Let's create a page. We'll call it validate account. It's a content page, still using the main layout as before. Just check for some reason those frameworks weren't added. So I'll just add them in. So we've got the situation now where the person, when they register, what we want to do is to go to that new validate account page. So I'll just save that. So we're going to change that success event within our registration page. We're going to go into our routing and we're going to send them to the validate account page. We'll give the page a title. Okay. So now when the person registers, we'll be taken to this screen. I'm going to add a container in there. We can add a row and a column. I'm going to duplicate that row and column. In that first one, I'm going to add a heading, and we're going to say validate your account. Actually, I'll duplicate that again. Let's have 3 rows because I want to then add a paragraph in here. See, I'm putting completely the wrong place. That should be inside that column. And in this we're going to prompt the user, you must now validate your account by adding the code, or not entering the code sent to your registered email address. Just tidy that up. Unconfirmed accounts will be removed after 24 hours, because I'm actually going to remove unconfirmed accounts after 2 days. So now we need to give the person the opportunity to validate that account. So we're going to add a form in, and within that form we're going to add a horizontal form group. I'm going to duplicate that because we want 2 boxes, and then under that I'm also going to add insert after horizontal forms, we're going to add a submit button. So there's our basic form. Now what we can do is we can just change those prompts. As for validation code, in this box I want them to re-enter their registered email. We don't need these secondary texts, so I'm just going to take them out. I'm going to change those placeholders to say enter validation code. I'm going to change this one to say enter email, enter registered email address. And we need to also give these the appropriate names in terms of their post input names. I'm just going to quickly match that up. We called it auth code, so I'll call that name auth code. And this one email. I also recommend that you update the IDs that will appear within the DOM here and here, but I'm going to leave that for you to do because I really don't need to show you how to do that on each occasion. We have our button. Our button is already set to a submit button. So if we save that, we now have our basic validate your account action screen. What we need to do now is to create ourselves a new API action. That API action is going to be validate code. What we're going to do is we're first of all going to want to get those inputs from our validation. Actually, before we do that, just quick though, we really should put some validation rules in there. So the code is required and the registered email is required, and we also make sure that that is in a valid email format. The reason I want to do that first is because we're going to again pull those details over from the form into our server action. So as our validate account page, we're going to pick up that form and then we're going to import those form details. You see there, it's pulled those over for us and the validations as well. So what's this action going to do? Straightforward, it's just going to do a single database action. It's going to be a single query, and that query is going to be to search for on a user table. I would like to know the ID of the person, and the condition will be that the auth code must match the auth code that's been posted, and we also want to match the email for the email that's been posted. So if those two match, then we can be fairly confident that it is the right person, they are doing the correct validation. If not, if that database query returns no results, then we know that those details were invalid and we can return a response accordingly. So we have that query first. Then we're now going to add a condition, and that condition will be simply, because we run a single database query, single query, all we need to do is specify the query, because it will either exist or not exist as a condition. So it basically, if there is a record in there, then we've got to do the appropriate action. In this case, what we're going to do is we're going to update the user table. We're going to just remove those fields because they're not needed. Our condition is going to be, now remember, when we created this single table, we actually returned the ID that it finds. So we can actually say if the ID matches the ID of the person found in that query, then what do I want to do? Well, I want to actually clear that auth code off. So I'm just going to literally hard code it to a space. And what we want to do is set the date that it was validated. And again, that's really, really simple here from Wappler, because we just pick the now, which is the server time on now UTC, which will be universal time constant. So basically, we have the valid code is validated, so we set the account to be validated by placing a validated date, and we've removed that authorization code as well. Nice and straightforward, and that will return a 200 success after completion. However, if we add an else, this is what happens if that doesn't work, if those details don't match a record in the database. And all we're going to do is, as we've done before on previous times, we're just going to send a message back, a 401, it's an unauthorized status, to say that the action was unauthorized. Straightforward enough, very, very simple server action. So let's save that. Let's go back to our validate account screen. Let's now tell that we need to use this particular server action. So we're going to be a server connect form. We're going to select that server action and we're going to select validate code. We're now going to add that all-important notifications that we used in the earlier screen, and we're also going to add the browser. So what's going to happen if this count is validated correctly? We'll get a 200 response, success response. If there's a problem, we'll get a 401 response, which is our unauthorized. And we need to deal with those responses. So as we did before, and there will come a point where I will just be saying to you, add the error and add the unauthorized responses in here, please. But for the moment, we'll just go through that again. So unauthorized. So that's what we sent back if those details didn't match. We need to go to our notifications. I use the warning, the orange one, and we will say just simply, obviously you can expand on these in great detail if you wish, but I'm keeping it simple. We need to add an error as minimum because server errors can happen, and that notification should be a danger one, which is the red one. Again, I'm just going to say error. And then lastly, the success one, we're going to be looking at server connect success. And in this case, we're going to use the browser component to say go to, and in this case, we're going to send to the home page. It's an internal link. And the title we want to use is homepage at this time. So there we are. Fingers crossed. Now that should be ready to test. So we need to go right back to the very start of the registration process. I'm just going to clear these data tables again, just to make sure that we don't have any issues with not being able to do things because of duplicated accounts. And while doing that, that's very nicely reminded me that actually we've missed a stage out on our server action. So of course here we update the date and we remove the code effectively, but we haven't added a role to that user because now they've been authorized on the system, they should have a role within the system. That's really easy. We just do a simple database insert, and we can then insert into the role table the user ID of the individual that we're dealing with. So we'll just take that from the picker, and we're going to hard code the role of member. So we're just going to put the letter M there. So I've also mistyped there the response code. So back to our reg code page. I like to talk these through with you because it talks it through in my head as well. We enter the code, we enter the email, that's validated. The 401 response comes back. So if it's wrong and if it's correct, then we'll get a success. Success event means that you'll be taken to the home page. So let's just save that all. let's go to our register page, let's fire it up in the web browser, and let's just see what happens. So we're going to start with Brian English. Brian at hyperbytes.co.uk. I'm going to pop our password in. I'm going to accept the terms and conditions. I'm going to click register. Okay, so we've certainly ended up in the page that we want to be at. It's our validate account page. I'm going to now fire up my email. Let's do a quick email check. And hopefully this code will be with us any second. There we are. There's our authorization code, 054278. I'll just copy and paste that. There's our validation code. My registered address was Brian at hyperbytes.co.uk. Spell it correctly, it would help. Submit that, and what should happen here is we've got a server error. Okay, now I wasn't expecting that, so let's have a little look and see what that problem is. If I submit that again, have a look at validation code. Okay, I know exactly what this problem is. And I'm kind of in some ways quite pleased that it happens. Just occasionally the web server in Wappler at the moment stalls. It has been reported, they are looking at it. So what I need to do is just stop it and start it. Now we'll have to go through that process again now. Just to show to you that that is the problem and it's not the code itself. It's always, incidentally, if you get that particular stalled server, it always is, it says that something is not found that quite clearly is there on the server. So you know exactly what it is there. I'll just double check that's saved again just to be totally sure. So right, let's go that registration process again. Let's do Brian English again. We'll do admin at hyperbytes.co.uk this time. Our repeated password, let's register that. I'm now going to just check my email again. That code should be through pretty well instantly. There we are. In this case our code is that. I'm going to enter the validation code in there. Admin at hyperbytes.co.uk. Again, let's make sure we spell it correctly. Let's submit that, and there we are. It's worked properly this time. And we're going to the home page. So that wasn't our code that was wrong, that was just Wappler glitching. I say hopefully you will never see that, because I know that the team are already looking at it as a problem. So let's just have a look at our data. What we should now have is, we'll actually see two users in there. Oops, didn't mean to do that. View our data for users, fetch it. We can see our first one where the auth code is still outstanding. It hasn't been validated. Then the second one that worked correctly, you see the auth code has now been removed and the account is shown as validated. And if we look at our roles, you can see that the role has been created, user ID 12, which was this user here, has been allocated the role of a member. So that's basically the validation of the code and the processes required behind that. I think in the next module we'll just do a little bit of tidy up and cleaning up of the pages themselves just so they look a little more professional. But this is the end of this particular module regarding processing of the authorization code. So thank you for joining me, and hopefully you'll be joining me again soon.